It's over. The seemingly infinite tale of Wano, the samurai, and Kaido has come to an end. There were absolutely some heart-pounding revelations that made me the most excited I've been in a while, but tucking my throbbing fan Boiner away for a minute, did this arc stick the landing? Arguably, this is what everything since the time skip has been building to, the culmination of over a decade of storytelling. So, what are my thoughts, emotions, and theories? Well, in this final video on Wano, I'm going to be talking about everything from manga chapter 1023 to 1057, which I binged in one day because I couldn't help myself. So, without further ado, let's sail on. Picking up right where we left off, the story gets into the lineage of several of the main players still left standing. Turns out there is more to King's secret race than was initially revealed by Marco. They are called Lunarians. Lunar? Da moon? Whitebeard told Marco that long ago, a race of gods used to live on the Red Line before Mary Joa was built. This just adds to the ongoing mystery of what the hell happened, what's the significance of the moon, and what are gods in the One Piece universe. It's likely no coincidence that actual godlike beings used to live there, and the humans from Wally who live there now call themselves gods. I never thought about the significance of the Red Line as a habitat, since we've only seen limited shots of just Mary Joa, but I guess there does have to be more to the location of the empty throne than just the center of the world. The most interesting tidbit to me in this section comes from King's opponent, the one-eyed swordsman Zoro. There is an explicit call out by Hawa and Hyo about Zoro resembling a past shogun, as well as Ryuma, the one-eyed samurai. This is so direct and so out of nowhere that it may as well be taken as fact. As we'll see in a bit, Hyogoro already has a proven track record of spouting on-point exposition. We know nothing of Zoro's biological family, but as we're about to see in a minute, Oda has no problem further fleshing out his childhood, so it's beyond possible that he could be a descendant of the samurai, and I don't know how I feel about that. Instinctually, it makes sense. But I do kinda like that he's just a normal guy who is insanely determined. With Sanji being a genetic experiment from an important figure, what we're about to learn about Luffy, I just worry that making everyone secretly more special than we knew is gonna rob the characters of their unique ragtag feeling. But fate! Or whatever. We'll just have to wait and see for confirmation on this. During the family squabble that shakes the world, we also learn more about young Yamato and Kaido's reasoning for treating him like he did. Frankly, this was about as boring and one-dimensional of a bad dad relationship as could be. I really feel like everything having to do with Yamato was a waste that didn't add much to the story. Yamato was imprisoned as a child alongside who we later find out to be the rebelling Daimos, and they became pals. Kaido's whole thing is that he believes Yamato can never have friends and should be feared, that strength is how you rule others, and that the child of ogres cannot be friends with humans. There are two things that I want to dive into. Firstly, the most obvious thing that no one has talked about yet: what's the deal with the ogres? I guess they've been hinted at as far back as Little Garden, but the story has just started using this term for these horned dudes. Where do they come from? Is there some level of animosity between them and humans that we just haven't seen before? It feels incredibly relevant to Kaido, but completely irrelevant to the ongoing narrative, which forms a disconnect in how I take in his motivation. Secondly, this you can't have friends thing doesn't make any sense. Oh, Yamato, people hate you, you gotta be tough. That's what Kaido sounds like. Not only is it cliche, but it's blatantly untrue, both for Yamato as well as Kaido. We see multiple examples of people being friends with Yamato, and it's because of Kaido that those friendships are destroyed and Yamato is forced to be alone. Also, we find out that Kaido was really good friends with King for sure, and he definitely had some weird friendship with Big Mom as well. We get a glimpse into why Kaido feels this way a bit later, but it didn't track for this to be the sole cause for this horrible father-child relationship, and it's extra disappointing because this is really as far as it goes. This is their big confrontation, and they never interact again. Although it's the writing for Kaido that's the problem here, the character who is hurt the most by it is Yamato. Back on the ground, Momo is 28, and he's a massive dragon. Yes, dude. This is everything that I wanted. Shinobu turned the Little Lord into an adult, but I love how his human form is only hinted at until the end of the battle. It makes for a satisfying reveal down the line, but also pays off this weird plot point that no one could have seen coming when the weird pink dragon was first introduced in the garbage compactor of Punk Hazard. Long-term storytelling at its finest. And his fight back up to Onigashima with Luffy on his back is so fun. Naturally, everyone's confused as all hell at the arrival of a second dragon. 2 dragons, let's go. While the Momo and Kaido face-off wasn't everything I dreamed of, I think it was better here than how I imagined it. I like that Momo is still a child in an adult body, and he's not instantly over his more cowardly instincts. Luffy has to continue to encourage Momo to come into his own as a man, and not be afraid of Kaido during their initial blows. Biting into the Emperor was a nice moment for him, but Momo doesn't overstay his welcome. The flame clouds lessening as Kaido gets weaker was a great way to keep Momo extremely important in this climax without stepping on the toes of Luffy and Kaido's fight. Of all the Wano specific characters, Momo was used the best in this Act 3 climax, and I really appreciate that, since at the end of the day, this is his story. He teams up with Yamato, who informs him that of course Onigashima is a floating bomb, and I thought their dynamic was really fun. I was excited to see their relationship and how Yamato's personality would get fleshed out. Oh, okay, he leaves them right away! The conflict between Luffy and Kaido begins, which clears the skies to allow Dogstorm and Cat Viper to once again transform into Sulongs and take down Jack and Parasparrow. Lick. I really appreciated that Dogstorm got revenge for the Minx, and I did like that Cat Viper ultimately avenged Pedro, but it felt like he kinda swooped in to steal Carrot's only interesting plotline, and that did disappoint me. Once she was defeated, she was just done, and I wish maybe she at least got an assist in the battle instead of watching on the sidelines. It's a small complaint, but I just wanted a win for Carrot here. Another character I've been rooting for who took a beyond belief thrashing in the last section was Kinemon. Now, I'm not one to believe that any main character in the series will ever die, but Kinemon did tread that line closely enough, and he did get horrifically demolished by Kaido, so I thought there was the smallest chance that he could have died. Bringing his severed legs back into the story after all this time was actually a brilliant move that took me by complete surprise. Fair enough. Although I kind of despise the talking out of his ass thing, I did really love this callback to Punk Hazard a lot, and it gets Usopp to go rescue he and Kiku. Unfortunately, since these 2 samurai are still alive, Kanjuro also has to be. That's 2 times now he's come back from death. Don't worry though, this time is for a very spectacular purpose that's extremely plot relevant. The drawing of a giant fire monster. Kanjuro should have stayed dead the first time, rather than robbing Kiku of her one victory. A fight that I found extremely satisfying was the Killer vs. Hawkins showdown. For such a small brawl, I found myself enthralled with the simplicity of how it unraveled. It was a brilliant decision to have the outcome of this fight tie into another grander fight, to give this one stakes in a way that was necessary for 2 characters that, frankly, aren't that important on their own. If Hawkins didn't have Kid connected to him as a straw doll, this fight could have been cool, but would have lost any narrative impact, which is a problem some one-on-ones can have. Hawkins is doing everything he can to hold Kid back from succeeding in his fight with Big Mom, naturally by bashing his head against the wall. The finest tactical strategy from a literal fortune teller. Killer decides to quit fucking around and cuts Hawkins' arm off, since Kid has no left arm and the damage can't be transferred, thus removing the straw doll and defeating Hawkins after he drew that symbolic tower card. All in all, this isn't the best fight in Wano, but it was quick, clever, and impactful to the plot. Probably the most succinct battle in this act, and I always appreciate those. With Kid back in the fight, he and Law actually bust out their awakened abilities, which was awesome. In the past, I've been critical of Awakening just because there hasn't been too much variety on display, but this is the goodness I've been waiting for. I love how Kid can make anything he touches magnetic for a short time, and how Law can infuse any object with his room ability, like his sword. It's a bit convenient Law can suddenly use an awakened ability. I guess he's been training in secret. But it was a badass development that was inevitable. When better to bust out your awakened ability than against Big Mom? She just takes the first round of attacks, and they only infuriate her into becoming bigger mob. Meanwhile, we see that CP0 is freaking out over how things are unfolding before getting a call from the big bad cat himself, Robert Lucci. The world government is heading toward Wano in the unlikely event that Kaido falls so they can take over the country themselves. Tricky kitty. But the big order that comes to the CP0 dudes on the ground is to capture Nico Robin. Oh, here we go again. Enough of that for now. It's time to focus in on the two battles I left my last video off with, two battles that will come to shape where these Straw Hats go in the future. Zoro versus King, and Sanji versus Queen. Firstly, there's a running gag that I love in this arc. The Brachiosnacus attack and the Imperial Deep Fried Steak both show the Dino dudes manipulating their bodies in bizarre ways. The same thing happened with Frankie and the Triceratops. The response each time is that the combatant had no idea dinosaurs could do that, and I just think that's charming. Anyway, Sanji starts his fight with Queen, but pretty early on, something is off with his body. It doesn't take long to piece together this must have been the result of using the raid suit, and once his body begins behaving with the abilities of his siblings, he books it out of fear that he's losing his humanity. This was an interesting beat for Sanji. Not only is this a massive power boost, but it's fun seeing him not wanted. Queen's connection to Judge comes into play with him taunting Sanji to use his Germa tech and abilities, but Sanji refuses to do so. I appreciate that both the circumstances and opponent connected to Sanji's Germa identity. It has been a lingering thread since Zo, and it's seemingly wrapped up here with a bow. In his head fog, Sanji believes he hurt a woman, which of course he didn't, but for the sake of the story, let's go with it. And that's the final straw. He makes up his mind to destroy his raid suit, his connection to Germa, and calls Zoro to ask him to kill him if he isn't himself after this fight. Naturally, Zoro agrees. Of course, it turns out it was horny Queen who hurt the woman. No surprise there, and Sanji unleashes his new power and speed. He may not be able to fly or go invisible anymore, but I mean, he pretty much can with his own insane power boost. He takes Queen down, and that's one lead performer off the board. As fun as the Sanji versus Queen battle was, I don't think it has anything on the true lead performers duking it out. I love how the battle between King and Zoro isn't an honorable sword fight, but King is still using his wings and talons like swords. Following the Lunarian info dump earlier, the mystery around King builds with word that no one is seen under his mask, and Zoro needs to figure out how this dude's body works in order to win. Really though, that's all secondary to Zoro digging deep to master the cursed swords that he has collected, especially Enma, which has been acting up. I love this. In a previous video, I said that I felt the cursed swords have untapped story potential, and I'd love to see Zoro struggling to master them in combat, so I couldn't have asked for more here. Yet, I was hand-delivered some fresh new backstory on Zoro, something that hasn't even been hinted at since before Baratie. Turns out Zoro's village was essentially run by people from Wano the whole time. The new info about the legendary swordsmith, the father of Zoro's master, and the grandfather of Kuina was a bit sloppy, but overall, very cool. Zoro came to possess two of this man's swords and used them in the battle to free his home nation. Yet another strange twist of One Piece fate. Zoro realizes that these blades chose him, and he begins to wield Enma properly by becoming a king. This was an interesting turn for Zoro's story to take. At first, that idea seems like it would conflict with Luffy's dream, but upon deeper reflection, that's not the case at all. Kaido's right hand is literally called King, Roger's right hand was known as the Dark King. Zoro has the color of the Supreme King just like Luffy, but he needs to step up and become a king in his own right to support his best friend and captain. He needs to become the King of Hell. That's badass, and I love it so much. Surprisingly, from King of all people, we finally get some backstory on Kaido and his crew. Turns out both King and Kaido were experimented on by the government, but Kaido broke King out, insisting that he was the only one who could change the world. King has an attachment to Kaido, seeing something in him that all right-hand men see in their captain, but he goes so far as to think Kaido is Joy Boy. That's a really interesting assumption coming from this Lunarian, whose design is fucking sick, by the way. Considering this godlike race has the most information about Joy Boy, I wonder what led him to believe that. Either way, Zoro learns the tricks of King's body and slices the Dino dude up. That's both lead performers down for the count, which means there's only 2 battles left to be won. One of those, of course, is Yamato versus the big fire hatred thing. No! I'm lying about that! Ugh. Kid and Law continue their fight against Big Mom, really going all out with some insane power to finally take her down. The conclusion to this brawl is very satisfying. While it does feel a little narratively disjointed to have Big Mom get finished off by 2 characters who really haven't interacted with her up to this point, on a grander scale, it makes sense that she would lose to these 2 captains rather than the remnants of the Straw Hats. If you have Law and Kid together, they need a big opponent to defeat. If Kid got the showcase in the last round, this round is all about Law. He busts out his awakened ability to an insane degree, stabbing his long sword all the way through her into the ocean before giving her the shock of a lifetime. I love how Big Mom just doesn't go down though. She's truly a horror creature, but thank God, Law finally shuts her up with his Corazon-inspired silence technique. No more mamas, no more shit talk, she can't use her soul focus or anything. Then, Kid blasts her through the floor, blowing up the armory, destroying Kanjuro's creature, and unceremoniously ending Yamato's entire subplot that really felt like a massive waste of time. It was a nice touch that the reader got a little peek inside Big Mom's head as she falls. She's angry with Roger for having summoned a new generation that she'd have to deal with, but he wouldn't. She reflects on the existence of the One Piece, how close she was to becoming king, before ending up in a massive explosion in the sea. Dead? I don't know, we'll get to that later, but at least her threat is finally over. As this is the culmination of the most built-up arc within a 25-year odyssey, naturally, there are a lot of moving pieces going on in the background, and some of them I'd like to talk about. Scratchman and Drake. 2 characters whose inclusion in this arc has really added to the mystery and confusion, have kept me on my toes. I really appreciated how most of the worst generation reconvened in Wano, and watching how their stories unfolded was fascinating. Scratchman gets his best characterization to date, showing his true colors when he tries to scheme with Drake to team up and betray whoever they can to succeed. Drake isn't that type of dude though, and continuously goes after Scratchman, who seems to really be Drake's polar opposite. I was definitely not expecting this to come around to the pair teaming up against the CP0 boys. In a way, it's fitting for Drake because of his own marine ties, and it gets at the real power struggle within the government. So of course, Scratchman escapes, whereas Drake goes down, which shows just how powerful these government thugs are. Meanwhile, Usopp has arrived to rescue Kiku and Kinemon, who both want him to save the other before they are all saved by Aizo. After they escape, Aizo confronts CP0, and at first, I didn't think they were going to fight. These dudes clearly didn't want any beef with Aizo, which shows just how powerful he is, but Aizo knows he can't let them get to the Straw Hats, and sacrifices himself for that cause. He does manage to do some serious damage, eliminating one of the pair and wounding the other. It's here we see some crazy shit. The 5 elders are well aware of the situation in Wano and issue an edict to eliminate Luffy now out of some mysterious fear. Meanwhile, Raizo and Dickhead's ninjutsu battle continues with them both evenly matched, and I appreciated how this was all played for comedy with none of the action on display. It's a fun subversion. At the same time, Zoro is confronted by someone who looks like the Grim Reaper, which is utterly disturbing. Nothing comes from this, and since it isn't brought up again, I want to say that this is the person who was miraculously healing everyone through the fight. Those are just 2 mysteries that could work together. Or that could have been Komurasaki, who is also just here now. She plays her instrument and makes her identity known to a wounded and trapped Orochi in a pretty satisfying, if a bit rushed and convenient way. But the real juicy bit of story that comes next is the arrival of Zunisha. Momo can fully talk to it and refers to Zunisha as a companion of Joy Boy. So, you know what's coming next. Back on the sexiest rooftop in fiction, Kaido and Luffy continue their battle. This is the best round of fighting for Kaido because it actually feels like he's bringing a unique personality into it, rather than just overly confident, tough guy. Kaido's various drunken attitude shifts are great, This is how he should have been written throughout the majority of the act. Could it have gotten annoying? Maybe. But when has that ever stopped Oda before? Drunk Kaido is the superior Kaido. The battle seemingly enters its final stage as Kaido begins to freak out over hearing about Big Mom's defeat, and Luffy goes at him in his final 4th gear transformation. As they charge at each other, they both know this is the conflict-defining strike, but it's interrupted by the CP0 agent just as Kaido's fight with Odin was interrupted 20 years ago. And it leads to the very same outcome. Distracted, Luffy is struck down, seemingly killed, and the look of regret and sadness in Kaido's eyes as he instantly makes this connection to his past is haunting. This is not how he wanted to win, both then and now. He is the strongest, yet he cannot prove that strength, nor be satisfied with it because his victories are suspect. He is robbed of the genuine glory that would have come through victory or defeat, and is crushed by that. This is by far the best Kaido moment. Seeing the look in his eyes actually gave me chills. With Luffy once more assumed dead, Kaido bursts back into the dome to demand Momo's surrender, and he nearly gives in until Zanisha declares, "Joy Boy has returned." Allow me to read you the note I wrote after everything that immediately unfolded. What the motherfucking fucking hell? Gum Gum Fruit is a zone-type human mythical fruit model Nika? Ladies and gentlemen, everything has culminated into a massive gumbo of insanity that I'm still grappling with. Throwing away all the mythology and world building for just a second, at its bare bones, Luffy has achieved the most ridiculous power in the world, a laughing cartoon character, and I love it so much. Not only does it fit so well with his pre-established character and abilities, but also serves as this delightful pivot point for a story that was becoming increasingly bogged down in a sense of dread. One Piece is fantastic at drama, but at its heart, there should always be comedy, and what a fantastic way to turn the typical shonen transformation on its head. Super Saiyan with even more extensive buildup, and it's Bugs Bunny. I mean, it's just damn fun to read, and I can't even imagine how good it will look animated since the roots of this form are clearly inspired by old school cartoons. Back into story mode. This is his awakened ability. That's such a fun twist on the setup from way back. Gear 5 isn't just Luffy pumping himself up in some weird way, it's the Gum Gum Fruit's natural evolution, which apparently equals an insane divine transformation, aka Nika, aka Joy Boy. Shanks had to know. He had to. After reading all this information, my heart was beating out of my chest. Somehow, the Gum Gum Fruit has evaded government capture for centuries, either through fate or some weird sentience, which is incredibly interesting, and so the government desperately wanted Luffy to die before he awakened. But that opens up a lot more questions. Why weren't they hunting for him with everything they had the second he entered the Grand Line? Monkey D. Luffy should have been enough, but they knew he had the Gum Gum Fruit too, which means they knew he had to be a walking, talking disaster waiting to happen. I guess you could headcanon it by saying they wanted to keep their true intentions under wraps. I think that's a bit of a weak sauce argument, but it could be made. Maybe there is some explanation that will come up eventually. Either way, this is the world government and Kaido's worst case scenario. I can't get over how fun the cartoony fighting style is, and it only got more intense as Kaido tried his best to fight back against wacky Looney Tune antics. Not only can Luffy make other things rubber so he has props, but he can even defy the laws of physics, like cartoon running on the sky back up to Onigashima. He manhandles Kaido with this insanity and has a blast doing it. Such a breath of fresh air. The dude can even make himself a giant and grab lightning bolts from the clouds. Complete madness. While I do love this, I worry that Luffy's become too powerful. I'm sure Oda will come up with a way for Blackbeard or Shanks or whoever to give Joy Boy a thrashing, but after this display of power, I just have a hard time imagining Luffy losing or getting even stronger. What is beyond a god? Before the finale comes, the story gives us an interesting last chance to reflect on Wano and its people that I think is worth briefly discussing. Obviously, the massive 1,000-year-old elephant in the room is that Wano is based on Edo, Japan, a historical period with a cultural impact on the modern society of the author's homeland. It isn't correct to view Wano as a direct one-to-one, but that fact should never be dismissed by the audience. Kaido refers to the people of Wano as weaklings who shun violence, casualties who found glory in death. In response to Luffy's declaration that the samurai are strong, Kaido asks, strong or stubborn? Notably, Usopp, who more than any other Straw Hat aside from maybe Brook, really had nothing to do in Wano, is given a scene to demonstrate how his personal philosophy differs from that of the samurai, and by extension, the people of Wano. Arguably, this is Usopp's big moment for the entire arc, and it's directly used to comment on this society. As Kiku and Kinemon plead for Usopp to save the other, Usopp declares that he's not a fan of this culture of theirs. He clings to life with snot dripping from his nose, not caring about honor or shame, and it's why he's still alive today. That's an interesting dichotomy that's emphasized by the arrival of Aizo, who tells the wounded samurai that Usopp is correct. They shouldn't merely be satisfied with the outcome of the raid, and gives them cover to escape, ironically sacrificing himself in the process. There is also a scene in a Yamato flashback that shows the former daimos imprisoned beside him who break out of their chains and sacrifice themselves in a bout of glory rather than withering away as prisoners. Are these people strong or stubborn? Through Usopp's confrontation with them, it would appear the story is saying that their philosophy can be short-sighted and detrimental to happiness. Not just their own, but also those they care for. But throughout this story, we've seen the samurai's mindset as a benefit. This dichotomy is fully on display with Aizo's sacrifice. So, what is Oda trying to say about the honor-obsessed mindset of the samurai? Honestly, I'm not sure. I'd really have to go through the story with a comb to feel confident making any conclusions, but this is something thought-provoking that was worth highlighting as we get one last look at the hell that was inflicted on this land. Oh, also, Denjiro beheads Orochi for the last time, which was just badass. What a shit villain, though. As Luffy and Kaido battle in the skies, the pair are both set to deliver their finishing blows. With no one left to interfere in the outcome, we finally get a look at young Kaido. This is something that I wanted to see far earlier than we got. I'm glad we did get this look at his past, because there were some useful insights, but frankly, I felt it was too little too late. Kaido was always a powerful kid, but he became a political tool for his kingdom, which resulted in his life of piracy. He joined the Rocks Pirates, which fell apart, and is likely how he was captured for experimentation. He escaped with King, formed his own crew, and was approached by the old witch bitch to partner for the takeover of Wano. This was the most Spark Notes montage of his life we could have gotten, but it's here that his philosophy is finally solidified for the audience. His version of freedom is a world where war decides a man's true worth. Kaido reflects on a past conversation he had with King, where he tells the Lunarian that he knows who Joy Boy is. Joy Boy is the one who will come to Wano and defeat him. All this time, he's been waiting for Joy Boy too, and in line with his philosophy, Joy Boy's strength is proven through victory in war. As he is about to be defeated, Kaido asks Luffy what world he'd create, and Luffy responds in the most Luffy way of all time that he'll create a world where his friends can eat as much as they want, and finally rockets Kaido down into the sea. The war is over. 2 emperors have been defeated, and then are completely annihilated in a massive volcanic eruption. Pretty rad way to go out. This has to be Oda telling us they're dead, right? Right? As the dust settles around the battlefield, the story takes an interesting turn when Momo tells Zunisha that he won't open Wano up just yet. The elephant respects his decision and then saunters off, which did kind of feel like a waste because Zunisha didn't really do anything other than look cool. But why won't Momo open Wano? What exactly is Zunisha's interest in that? After all, Joy Boy is already here. So what would opening the country even do at this point? Another long-standing mystery for the histories. Meanwhile, Yamato meets up with the rest of the crew and once again claims he'll be sailing out with the Straw Hats, but the way Jinbei says, yeah, sure, not your decision, made me think that he actually wasn't going to join. And honestly, good. way too uninteresting. Then finally, Momo makes his debut as an adult, and his design is so dope. He's welcomed by the citizens of Wano, and a new era of Kazuki rule has begun. Hell yeah. So, after all that, it's time for some classic post-climax wrap-up and goofing around, while of course, info dumping just enough to continue to drive me nuts. Flash forward 1 week after the battle, and the nation has learned the true history of Odin, the rumor of Joy Boy spreads, and reflections of those they lost along the way are made. I have to say, credit for actually killing some real characters off. Ashura was whatever, but Aizo was badass. Hawkins was serviceable, Orochi can get fucked forever, and if Big Mom and Kaido are truly dead, then that's the first major antagonist to have been killed throughout the series, and we desperately needed that to occur. Then Luffy and Zoro wake up, Momo gets acclimated to his adult life, and it's bath time. It's not all fun and games though. As the dust finally begins to settle, the outside world begins creeping in. Scratchman has info on some new bounties that is extremely important, and also the Mystery Admiral Green Bull is heading to Wano. We don't get the full list of Straw Hat bounties, but what we do get is incredibly significant. 3 billion berries each for Law, Kid, and Luffy, but look at that poster. Luffy in his Joy Boy form is revealed to the world, against the world government's wishes, but Morgans insists on getting it out as quickly as possible, even going so far as to call his form mystical. So Morgans knows some shit. He has gotta be one of the most important characters in this series, but also, did a global newspaper exist before him? It seems like his endgame is ultimately aligned with bringing in the Dawn. Either way, I'll always take some juicy Morgans info. Turns out Nose Guy was Odin's dad the whole time. I've gotta say, that twist completely caught me off guard. I knew something was up with Odin's dad, since we never got any answers about his death, but I just assumed the honking schnoz was a swordsmith, and that was it. This does harken back to something established in Act 2 of Wano that was either a red herring, or Oda just deciding he didn't want to do something anymore. That is, the dolls Brook found in Orochi's castle. I assumed they'd be important, but they're not, and it kind of feels like they're just addressed here so they wouldn't be a lingering plot thread. Kind of disappointing. Oh, also, turns out Pluton is in Wano. I love how Law found Robin before the history lesson. He's not getting left out of anything anymore. This is his sole purpose in life now. We're told there's an old Wano beneath the ocean, and that is where the road poneglyph is, but opening the borders of Wano literally means releasing the walls that sealed in this original land and unleashing Pluton onto the world. So in this case, I'm assuming the ancient weapon is an actual item and not a person. That's interesting. Naturally, Luffy doesn't care. After a celebration that has to be the best one since the time skip, this is when Green Bull touches down in Wano. He immediately eliminates all the captured forces in Udon, which means most of Kaido's crew are slaughtered. Pretty terrifying entrance, which also shows just how vicious and different this admiral is compared to others. Seems much more in line with Sakazuki, which is surprising to me. He then begins his march on the Flower Capital, but is intercepted by the Kazuki allies. To be honest, while I find this admiral's powers to be very interesting, I don't find his personality to be that interesting, which I was kind of surprised by because I've loved every admiral we've met up to this point. Maybe this just isn't the best showcase for him, but after all this build-up, I was hoping for another instantly iconic character, but maybe that's on me. The Kazuki allies hold Green Bull back without calling for any help. Momo wants to be able to defend the nation without relying on outsiders who've already helped them so much. He even masters some dragon moves in his fight, but it isn't enough. Good thing Shanks blasts the admiral with haki from the sea to get him to stop, and he immediately does. He's like, oh shit, Shanks, fine, bye. That's how insane his power is. Just like Marineford, stops things instantly. Jesus Christ. Of course, Luffy and the others were watching the whole time, letting the Kazukis fight it out, but there for backup if needed. I really like that detail. Anyway, Shanks! He arrives outside of Wano, I'm not quite sure why, but after his crew pester him to finally go see Luffy, he decides, nah. Instead, he makes up an excuse about Bartolomeo conquering parts of his territory in Luffy's name, badass, then states it's time to claim the One Piece. So Shanks does want it. Or does he really? Everything he does seems to be to motivate Luffy. Regardless, this puts him and Luffy on a collision course that's long overdue, and I'm so excited to see it. At long last, it's time to say goodbye to Wano. Kinemon wasn't able to assist with the Admiral because, to no one's surprise, Subaru is actually alive! Great writing! It's also here that the story begins to wrap up all the players that have stuck around since entering the new world. Carrot, oh poor, useless Carrot, you will now be the king of Zou. Cat Viper and Dogstorm are stepping down to stay in Wano and say that Carrot should be king because she's traveled the world. Not really though. She went to like one other place than Wano in her life and didn't stay for very long. Kind of a flimsy reason, but whatever. At this point, I've given up hope I'll ever care about Carrot. In classic Straw Hat fashion dating back to Alabasta, they sneak out after their victory without saying goodbye to Momo and Kinemon. That simply isn't gonna fly. While they look for their friends, let's talk about the insane revelations from across the world. According to reports, Sabo killed Cobra and Vivi disappeared at the same time, Charlos was almost murdered, there's some holy knights involved, and Sabo is being worshipped as a near religious figure, referred to as the Flame Emperor, as revolution sparks across the world. Is that enough insanity to fuel theory videos for years to come? I think so. I was never expecting this to be the impact of the Reverie. It seems like it really blew up in the world government's faces, and based on Sakazuki freaking out, I'd say things have never been this bad for the people in charge. Let the games begin. Oh, also, there are new emperors. Shanks, Blackbeard, Luffy, and Buggy? How? Oh, but that's not all. Buggy is also the leader of the Cross Guild, with Crocodile and Mihawk working under him. Under Buggy? There's no fucking way. What's going on? It's awesome to see Crocodile back in the story, but what's his endgame here? How did Mihawk get looped into this insanity? They have to be using Buggy, who likely just failed upward once again, but this is an interesting development in more than just the Alliance, because they are now putting bounties on Marines. A clever way to start scaling some of these adversaries as we enter the endgame. I'm curious where the Admirals stack up, but what is going on? It's time to depart. The three captains chose their different destinations and dissolved their alliance. The next time they meet will be as competitors for the One Piece. Bring it on, fuckers! You're gonna beat Joy Boy? Yeah, sure dudes. Meanwhile, Momo and Kinemon have met up with Yamato, who, in a roundabout twist, suddenly decides he isn't gonna join the crew. Okay, so what the hell was that all about then? Don't get me wrong, I'm glad, but this just felt so jarring, as if Oda is actually the one who changed his mind. I guess it's a net positive with some in-story logic, but now I truly don't understand what the point was of introducing this largely superfluous character. If you cut Yamato from Wano, I don't really think much changes. Momo and Kinemon confront the Straw Hats, and Momo breaks down about them leaving, but Luffy tells them they're welcome on a ship anytime, and gives them a Straw Hat flag to fly, a signal to any enemies that if they mess with Wano, they mess with the Straw Hat Pirates. Fuck yes. This was a touching farewell, and the first territorial claim the crew has successfully made. Luffy, Law, and Kid command their ships to set out over the falls, and the tale of the samurai of Wano comes to an end. For now. Overall, Wano is a beast to try and analyze from top to bottom. Even after making 5 videos on the arc, I still feel like I have so much more left to say, and it's pretty difficult to criticize unsatisfying plot points in a serialized narrative like this. So instead, I'll give the most bare-bones summary of my thoughts. I really liked it. I don't think it's my favorite arc, but it's the one that impressed me the most. The scale of Wano, and everything that built to it, is unlike anything I've ever seen, and for that reason alone, it has to be respected. I loved the protagonistic forces. I felt like the main players we were meant to root for got the perfect amount of screen time, although the Akazaya 9 as a whole felt pretty shallow. The antagonistic forces were hit or miss for me. Big Mom as this hulking force of nature, more monster than man, was great to see, and I loved her more human moments, but there's just something missing with her that keeps her from entering the top echelon of villains. Orochi was dog shit. I really did not enjoy how he was utilized, probably Wapol tier for me. Kaido's goons were great. King and Queen paired well with Zoro and Sanji. Kaido himself was a bit of a letdown. Yeah, he big strong man, but we always knew that. I had hoped we'd get a bit more, and at times, we did. I mean, that moment when he and Luffy were interrupted by CP0 was maybe one of the best villain moments in the entire series. I love it that much. But overall, he was tough, and that's it. Maybe in retrospect, I'll come to appreciate him more, but as of now, he feels more like an obstacle than a character, which works in its own way. And of course, all the world building in this arc was supreme. Second to none in that regard. From Odin to Nika and everything in between, just fantastic storytelling that rewards a patient audience while not fully blowing its load and promising even more insanity to come. With that said, that's the video. One Piece is over and I sure did enjoy the ride. I can't believe it ended with everyone diving off a cliff and drowning. Oh, wait. There's more chapters after Wano? A new arc has begun? But it's not finished. What am I supposed to do now? What am I supposed to do now? I guess I'm gonna keep reading and watching, and when a new arc finishes, I'll be here to give my thoughts. One Piece First Impressions will be back after the Egghead Island arc? Dear God. An island filled with dorks? I better see some nerds get bashed good. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you watched any or all of my First Impressions videos on One Piece, I don't know if I should be concerned or flattered, but thank you very much for your time. Special thank you to my patrons who have been legitimately very encouraging. Just the idea that someone would support me like this means a lot to me. And also, they're totally cool and have massive, thick butts, which is a good thing. Thanks again for watching, and now I'll finally shut up about One Piece. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Where did all this furniture come from? Keith. Uncooperative Keith! We're not done with you yet. There's still more of the new world to explore. More fun locations for the family. I don't understand any of this. Who are you? We've gotta get you ready for Egghead Island, Keith. Good thing there's plenty of time for you to recover.